The lecture hall of the Galactic Academy buzzed with the soft hum of translation devices and the occasional chirp from the Gilthari students in the back row. Professor Vex Nor, a distinguished Kentarian with silver-tipped antennae, stood before the assembled class of xenobiology students, his three-fingered hand gesturing toward the holographic display. "Today," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of academic tradition, "we examine one of the galaxy's most fascinating mysteries. The extinct species known as Homo sapiens, or as they called themselves, humans." Nancy Chen sat in the third row, her fingers drumming against her datapad, fighting the urge to smile. Beside her, Daniel Rodriguez shifted in his seat. His jaw clenched as he maintained the carefully practiced stillness they'd both perfected over the past 3 months. "These creatures," Professor Vex Nor continued, manipulating the hologram to display a human figure, "thrived on a death world designated Terra 3, third planet from a yellow dwarf star. Remarkably, they evolved in 1.02 standard gravity, far exceeding the comfortable range of most sentient species." A Forian student, its gelatinous form rippling with curiosity, raised a pseudopod. "Professor, the records indicate humans wore restrictive coverings over their bodies. Why would an extinct species require such discomfort?" Vex Nor's antennae twitched with what might have been amusement. "An excellent question, Zeal 4. You see, humans evolved on a world with extreme temperature variations and possessed no natural protective coating like fur, scales, or chitin. These clothes served multiple purposes: thermoregulation, protection, and, inexplicably, social signaling." Nancy felt the collar of her academy uniform pressing against her throat. The synthetic material designed for a dozen different species was never meant to accommodate human physiology. She reached up, fingers grazing the edge, resisting the overwhelming urge to loosen it. "The truly fascinating aspect," Vex Nor said, zooming in on the hologram's torso, "was their internal structure. Humans possessed a rigid endoskeleton bones. They called them made of calcium compounds. Can you imagine? Hard structures inside their bodies, with soft tissue surrounding them. Absolutely barbaric by modern standards." Daniel leaned imperceptibly toward Nancy, his whisper barely audible even to her enhanced human hearing. "How much longer?" 20 minutes, she breathed back. "We can make it," the professor continued, oblivious. "These bones served another purpose, beyond structural support. They produced the cells that carried oxygen through their blood. A crude, but effective system. Unlike our own hemocyanin, or the Vex's photosynthetic circulation, humans relied on iron-based hemoglobin, which turned their blood a vivid red color." A collective shudder ran through the class. The very idea of iron flowing through living tissue seemed grotesque to species who had evolved beyond such primitive chemistry. "Furthermore," Vex Nor added, his tone taking on a darker quality, "they couldn't outrun their prey, couldn't overpower it with venom or natural weapons. Instead, they simply followed. For hours, sometimes days, until their prey collapsed from exhaustion. The human's ability to regulate temperature, through water secretion, sweating, they called it, meant they could continue when others could not." Nancy felt a bead of that very same sweat forming at her temple. The climate control in the lecture hall was set to galactic standard, comfortable for most species, slightly too warm for human comfort. Another adjustment she'd learned to endure. "But surely, Professor," interjected a Quillian student, its feathers ruffling with skepticism, "such a primitive species could never have achieved spaceflight? The records must be exaggerated." Vex Nor's expression grew solemn. "That, young Krethar, is where human mythology becomes truly unsettling. According to recovered data fragments, humans went from primitive combustion engines to artificial intelligence in less than 300 cycles. They split the atom. They walked on their own moon. They built machines that could think." He paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the class. "And then," he continued, Approximately 4,000 cycles ago, they simply vanished. No war, no plague that we can detect, no environmental catastrophe. The humans of Terra 3 disappeared, leaving behind only ruins and fragments of their cultural database. Nancy's collar felt impossibly tight now. She reached up again, this time actually tugging at it slightly, trying to create just a millimeter more space. The movement caught Daniel's eye, and she saw the warning in his gaze. Not yet. Stay still. The prevailing theory, Vexnor said, is that humans destroyed themselves. Perhaps their aggressive nature, their stubborn persistence, their refusal to accept biological limitations. Perhaps it all became too much. They reached too far, too fast, and paid the ultimate price. Another student, a crystalline Sharketh, chimed in. Did they leave any warnings? Any messages for future civilizations? The professor manipulated the hologram again, and Nancy's breath caught. There, floating in the air, was an image of an actual human spacesuit from the archives, the kind worn by early astronauts. The bulky white covering, the reflective helmet, the American flag patch on the shoulder. Her grandfather had one just like it in his quarters on the colony ship. Only this, Vexnor said softly. A phrase recovered from multiple human sources, carved into monuments, encoded in their digital archives. Per aspera, ad astra. Through hardship to the stars. Nancy couldn't take it anymore. The collar, the heat, the irony of sitting in a classroom learning about her own species' supposed extinction, it was too much. She reached up and adjusted her collar, pulling it away from her throat with an audible tug. The room fell silent. Feels tight after all, Nancy muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Every eye and visual sensor, and thermal pit, and echolocation organ turned toward her. Professor Vexnor's antennae shot straight up in alarm. Student Chen, he said slowly, his translator crackling with confusion. Are you experiencing discomfort from standard academy attire? Daniel closed his eyes, a small smile playing at his lips. After 3 months of hiding, of pretending to be just another alien species from an unimportant world, the game was finally up. Nancy stood, her chair scraping against the floor. She was taller than most species in the room, her posture impossibly straight, thanks to that rigid endoskeleton the professor had just been describing. Her skin glistened with that primitive cooling system called sweat, and her eyes, those forward-facing predator's eyes, swept across the classroom with the calm confidence of a species that had once walked on their moon just to prove they could. Professor, she said, her voice clear and steady. I need to correct something. Humans didn't go extinct. We just learned to be quiet. Daniel stood as well, and now the class could see them for what they were. The bone structure, the muscle definition, the subtle differences that had been hiding in plain sight all semester. 4,000 cycles ago, Nancy continued. We didn't destroy ourselves. We discovered the galactic community. And we realized that everyone was terrified of us. So, we made a choice. We would learn. We would watch. We would wait. Vexnor's antennae drooped. You've been here. All along. Not just here, Daniel said, gesturing to the viewport where stars glittered in the darkness. Everywhere. On colony worlds. On trade stations. In academies like this one. Learning your languages, your customs, your fears. But why? Zilfor burbled, its form quivering. Why hide? Nancy adjusted her collar one more time, finally loosening it enough to breathe properly. She smiled, that peculiar human expression that showed teeth. That could mean joy or threat, or both. Because we wanted to make sure, she said, that when we finally said hello, we'd know how to do it right. We're persistence hunters, Professor. We can wait. Outside the lecture hall's viewport, a massive ship decloaked, its hull bearing the insignia Nancy had seen on that archived spacesuit. The American flag, alongside the flags of 100 other human nations, united under a new symbol, Earth, surrounded by stars. The professor's translator crackled. I believe, class, We need to revise our curriculum." Quote, Nancy grinned. "We'd be happy to help with that, Professor. After all, we've got 4,000 years of catching up to do." And for the first time in millennia, humanity stepped out of the shadows and into the light of the galactic community, not as conquerors, but as the patient, persistent students they'd always been, ready at last to teach the galaxy what it truly meant to be human. The end.